majority rule after the rule, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I don't want to just read the whole time I'm here.
Hey, you know what, Angela? You actually brought something up a couple of minutes ago when you were reading the last thing that I kind of wish to expound on. But you were
Okay.
talking about, I guess someone was writing that in the administrative courts, like there's no way of winning. And
Well, there's
I
no
would
way that you
actually,
can, yeah, well, I mean, you can argue your brow, until you're blue in the face. I don't think, well, anyway, go ahead. Don't mind me.
yeah, well, I mean, I don't argue with that at all. Like in the administrative courts, the law is basically up to the whim of the judiciary, which has gotten in bed with the other two
Yeah.
branches of government, and they're all working together at this point in collusion against the people. The constitutions and the law of the land, they all guarantee that you have the right to a court of law, and that is not a court of administrative process. So
Mm.
as long as you can point out that it's a court of administrative process, even if you lose, they cannot execute the judgment without some type of consent. And typically the courts get this consent through overt tactic or implied consent, which is basically just another way of saying that you don't know that you're giving your consent. Your ignorance of the consent that you are giving. It's kind of like, earlier in this conversation, when I was talking about asking a judge a question in law, and then you were saying, well, he just says this and run over you. Okay, well, until he answers the question, you don't move forward. Okay, now if you choose to move forward with him not answering the question or her not answering the question, you're giving your consent. And it's not that you know you're giving your consent, you're giving your consent through your actions, because it's a maxim of law that your actions speak louder than your words. So even though you say, I don't consent, rape, stop doing this to me, if you keep moving forward and you keep going along with that process, then the actions of you moving forward and going along with that process speaks louder in law than the words of you saying, no, stop, don't do this. It, do you see what I'm saying?
Mm. Yeah.
Maybe.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah. Is that it?
Well, I mean, basically, it's like, look, we're coming to a point in time where people are either going to find a court of law or they're not, and people are going to have to come together
Mm.
to find that court of law. Like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if you really knew law, you could go move in that common law action and they would have no problem letting you do it as long as you really knew what you were doing, because
Mm.
so few people knew what that was. And now they're testing everybody. Now they are shutting down courts of law. And the only courts that anybody's seeing are these privately held administrative courts. And basically, the counterculture has known that these are the courts that exist for a really long time. But in the counterculture, it's like they've seen some victories because there were a couple of people who kind of figured out law. And they have very uniform answers. Like you were reading something else earlier where, by the end of it, the guy was kind of lightheartedly talking about if the adversary comes back with anything different than what he's kind of written out in the script, then it won't go the way that he's thinking. And there's so many scripts that have been put out on the internet. Okay, you just do step one, step two, step three. And whenever people go in there and they do these things, the other side, the legal society, they're very uniform and they're going to respond very uniformly. Okay, so they're going to figure out ways of getting around this. It's kind of like when you were talking about Irwin Schiff and his $50,000 reward. There were probably 5,000 people calling the IRS and calling, CPAs. They probably got the information out really quick, like, hey, we don't know what to tell these people, just hang up on them or you're going to get fired. And I have actually seen this in my own personal experience. I've gone into a courthouse and had a conversation with the court clerk, like with the high clerk. And when I walked out of there, I started calling and putting the word out to everybody I know. Start calling up to this place, start asking them these questions, start asking them why they can't do these particular things that they're supposed to do. And the first 5 to 8 people, like they didn't know how to answer them. Like they were putting them on hold, switching them to other people. Then, but after those first 5 to 8 people, they had a very uniformed answer for everybody. Anybody who called after those first 5 to 8 people who called, they said the exact same thing verbatim to every single individual that called that courthouse. But at first, they didn't know what to do. And this is what the counterculture has done to the mainstream legal culture. I mean, I think it's absolutely hilarious studying some of this stuff because I'm still pretty young. But when I've watched some of the videos of people going in back in like the early 2000s and saying, hey, you're charging the person, I surrender the birth certificate, and walking out, and the judge just being like, what do I do? I think that is hilarious because it shows that they aren't ignorant of what they're doing. It shows that they knew how they tied the person in. It showed intent. Because when you go in there and you say, who's the man or the woman who's done me wrong? Where's the verified claim? They will never answer that question. And I've even been, well, I wasn't told by a superior court judge, but I saw somebody be told by a superior court judge that the questions they were asking to the court would never be answered. And the reason is that as soon as the court answers those questions, they're engaged in fraud. Before they answer those questions, you could come back at them with negligence, but negligence isn't criminal because to do something criminal, you have to have malice intent. You have to know what you're doing is wrong and you have to do it on purpose. But once you know that what you're doing is wrong and you're doing it on purpose, and the guy who was told that the court would never answer his questions, he went through 9 different judges. And the reason he went through 9 different judges is because they'd never bring him the same judge twice. Because if you ask the judge the first time and he doesn't have the answers to your questions, it's his job, it's his responsibility, it's his duty and obligation to have the answers to those questions the next time you come into court. And that's why they never had the same judge for him twice. A lot of the stuff, if you really know what's going on, it's pretty simple, but it's so simple that it's incredibly complex. But you got to keep asking the same questions. You cannot falter, you cannot stumble, you cannot in any way appear to consent with these people, and you cannot move forward until they answer these questions. And and I know that sounds kind of easy, but when you have that fear, when you're afraid of this monolithic system of police officers and courthouses and judges and governments and the boogeyman under the bed, and you go into those buildings, there's no telling what you're going to do because fear has this way of controlling people and overcoming them. And even if you have a plan of action in your mind, I have seen people go into court and they were, 2 weeks before going into court, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to tell the judge that. And, I'm going to be a man, I'm going to be a woman going into court. And then they get into court and they freeze up from fear. When you really have the answer in your heart, it doesn't matter what the other side says. You always have something to respond to them with. And it should never be adversarial because court is for controversy. Take all the controversy away. Just like, who did I cause harm, injury, or loss to? Nobody. Then why am I here? There's no controversy. Well, the state says this, that, and the other. Well, who's the state? You say they're saying something. Can you put them on the stand so they can actually say it? Like, I would actually like to hear it from the state individual. Are they here today? Don't fight with them.
Ooh.
Like, we were helping somebody out with the IRS, and they said, well, I sent them a letter back saying, hey, just validate the debt. Well, okay, they sent a couple of IRS officers to help you validate the debt. You asked them to do this. You asked them to help you validate the debt. They couldn't verify the debt. If you would have said, hey, just verify the debt, just get up on the stand and swear that it's true to a no and hand me a bill of particulars, I'll settle it right now. But you asked them to validate the debt. And that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're just trying to help you out because obviously you're confused. And that's what's going on with a lot of people, is that everybody's confused and everybody thinks they have the answer and everybody thinks they have it figured out. I'm still learning new things every day. Like when I
Yeah.
was growing up, I was always told, a day isn't any good if you didn't learn something. I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
No, no. I'm just agreeing with you.
So people have got to start waking up. They've got to get out there. Like, the reason why this information isn't spreading like wildfire is because of how it's being presented. The average individual, like most people, think paying taxes is insane, or not paying taxes is insane is actually what I meant. Most people think not paying taxes is insane. And I talk with a lot of these people because, taxes is really what got me into this issue, like working on it full time, because believe it or not, a lot of people don't want to pay taxes. So there's a lot of tax issues out there. And I was talking with somebody the other night, and they were talking about taxes and income taxes, and I was like, well, what do you pay income taxes for? Like, where's the bill of particulars on income taxes? Because if I get property taxes, it's like, okay, 12.5% goes to the school and 12.5% goes to the police department and some to the fire department, some to the library structures. And, some people ask me how I get out of paying property taxes. And I tell them, just pay property taxes, because it's the people who have owned property historically who have basically funded the building of society.
That's
And
right.
so if you have property and you have property rights, I believe that you should pay property taxes. And not only that, they itemize it for you. They say this much goes here, this much goes there. And some
Uh,
people.
I don't. I have a problem with that. I mean, you would pay property tax if it was a commercial enterprise, perhaps, because it's an ad valorem tax that they tack onto your house, which is a commerce tax. And if you're not conducting business in your house, you shouldn't have to pay a tax on it. Shouldn't have to pay a tax on um, your home. And I mean, alcohol, tobacco, firearms, those are all taxable, and those are okay to be taxable, but not your house. But that's me. That's my opinion.
Yeah, well, and I don't think that your house should be a large tax. And I don't think that anybody should lose their house because of taxes. But I do believe in property tax because, as I said, historically, it's been property owners who have paid for the development of society. It's been property owners who have paid for the development of towns, schools, police departments. And, when people talk to me about property tax, it's like, well, people say, well, I haven't used the police. Okay, well, if you were getting robbed or mugged, wouldn't you want them to show up? You know, I, I'm not going to argue about whether they do or whether they do a good job. And typically, you have to go and catch the bad guy and hand them over to the police. But if your house were burning down, wouldn't you want the fire department to be there? Like, I've actually been in a situation where the fire department absolutely saved my life. Um, I have people, they say, well, I don't have any children in school, and I've never had children that went to school. Okay, well, do you really want an incredibly dumb society around you? Do you really want a society of people who can't read and write? Because Like, even in our society right now, you think it's bad right now. Just think if all of these morons couldn't read or write or communicate with one another. You know, it would be that much worse. And, when people will say, well, I've never used the library, I always respond with, you should. Sometimes people ask me where I learn everything I learned, and they go, what do I have to Google to know what you know? Because that's what everybody believes is like, you can just Google answers. And I'm like, you can't Google what I know because they, like, even down at the libraries, since 2001, they have made a very, very concerted effort to limit what type of books and what type of information is down there because ideas are incredibly powerful. You can kill a man, you can kill a revolutionary, you cannot kill a revolution, you cannot kill an idea. You cannot kill. It's like what you were talking about with how you knew when you didn't have to pay taxes, when nobody could tell you or point you to the law that said that you had to pay taxes, you never paid again. It's because of that taste of freedom. That taste of, ooh, I don't have to do it. I am free. Let me out of these chains. And when people get out of those chains, they don't want to go back. I don't know. Sorry for ranting. I just was getting into a moment there. I don't know how I went from administrative courts to this, but sorry. I'm going to finish the conversation that I was having with the gentleman about taxes. So I said, income taxes, where they go to? And he brings up roads, because that's typically what people bring up first. And I say, no, 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 no. You pay for the roads every time you buy a gallon of gasoline and put it in your car. And that's self evident in this state because we just raised the gasoline tax and they are already building nicer and newer roads based on the income that gasoline tax raise is going to revenue. And so that is obviously what pays for the roads. And I got them kind of stuck for a moment. And so I continued to proceed because I knew that this individual was very liberal and watched NBC. And I said, it's very interesting because here in America, we know for a fact that back in Nazi Germany, the Reichstag building that got burned down, we know that the Nazis did that now. And they didn't know that back when it got burned down. And that's how the Nazis came to power. We know for a fact now that Pearl Harbor was allowed to happen, that it wasn't just some surprise attack, that the Navy, the high officers in the Navy, and the President of the United States absolutely knew that it was coming and did nothing to prevent it. And you have all of these people, especially today, it's all like Nazi. We don't want to turn our country into Nazi, because when we fought World War II, we fought to against Hitler and we fought against fascism. And we beat Hitler, but fascism won because just like Mussolini said, fascism is the merger of state and corporate power. And that's what you have here in America. So fascism won. And when people talk about, oh, we don't want to turn into Nazis, they recognize and know, because everybody's been conditioned for this, that in Nazi Germany, they achieved the power that they had and the control that they had over the people through propaganda. But everybody here in America, they love to say, "Oh, you're watching propaganda because you're watching Fox News and they said this, this, and this. That was false. Oh, you're watching propaganda because you're watching CNBC or NBC and they said this, or PBS and they said this, this, and this. That was false. Or oh, you're watching propaganda because you stick to the counterculture and they said this, this, and this, which is false." But nobody, not one individual says, I'm watching propaganda. Because if somebody said that to themselves, they'd stop, they'd quit. And when I brought this up to the individual I was talking to, they said, oh, so I guess your news sources are, you know, strictly monitored and very good and verified. And I was like, man, I don't watch news. You know, I don't watch TV. Like, the only reason I knew the market dropped 800 points is because I like to check it every now and then. I didn't read some market watch article on it. I didn't get somebody's opinion of an opinion of an opinion about it. And it brings me back to this conversation that I was having with this very intelligent young lady. I was trying to see what she was interested in, and I was like, what do you like to think about? And she's like, I like to research a lot. Well, how do you do that research? And she goes, well, I read a lot of articles. And I go, can I just make one suggestion? Yeah, I respect what you gotta say. You can make a suggestion. Don't read articles. What do you like to research? And she said, I like to research, the meaning of life. What's it all about? And I said, don't read articles. Go back to the classics. Go back to the greats. Go back to Socrates. Go back to Cicero. Go back to Eastern philosophy, to the original transcripts. Go back to what Jesus originally said and study the people who originally brought these ideas to earth. Because if you don't go back to the original, you're just reading an opinion of an opinion of an opinion, and you're never going to make up your own mind because your mind is being shaped by an opinion. Go back to the original and look for the truth and search for the truth for yourself, and what feels correct to you, what's going on in your heart. That's the best advice that I could give to her, and that's the best advice that I could give to anyone else. And that's the same thing that I'm going to say about news, media, propaganda. All of it is, once you realize that these people are lying to you, like, I don't know about you, but my life is way too short to be lied to all the time. If I know you're a liar, I'm not going to listen to you anymore. It's just that simple.